So there's one thing that pretty much holds true in almost every creative space, right? Artists want to make good art. Well, what if I told you, though, that bad art is just as important? That's what we're going to talk about today because I think it's a really important point to make. It's a very important thing to talk about, and it's something that's not as talked about as much. But first, though, let's talk about the art. I went and I used the footage for the Pokemon Willow print design. I'm still working on the others. It's just I'm still having to baby my elbow. It's almost better. It's getting there, but it's still pretty stiff and pretty sore. But it's getting much better. It's getting much closer to being healed, but it's still taking some time because I did like 3 months worth of extra stress to it before I actually figured out what was wrong and got the appropriate treatment. So I am working on the others, but here's Willow. I still really like this piece. I think it turned out really well, really cute, and I hope you guys like it. But with that, let's get back to the topic. So, as much as we all hate it, bad art is honestly essential to growth. I saw something that I thought was really nice, and to those of you who get this reference, it's probably gonna be older people like me, but in the words of Miss Frizzle, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. It's one of those things where to get better with art, you have to make mistakes. You have to take chances. You have to do things that aren't always essentially, quote-unquote, good. It's one of those things that people don't talk about. And I'm sure that you've heard before that behind every great piece of art is tons of bad art that the artist has made before. Not every piece that any artist churns out, even if they are a professional, even if they've been at it for years, is going to be absolutely top-notch. But those quote-unquote bad pieces is how we learn. Everyone is constantly looking for tips and tricks for making quote-unquote good art. And that is what is usually posted online. That's what's out there for people to consume. But I think that contributes to the prevalence of perfectionism and the absolute stress, which in itself is damaging in artists and that artists go through, especially online. It's very prevalent, it's very common, and I really think that just posting how to improve and how is better and doing your best not to post anything bad, that's going to stress people out and just contribute to that more and more. It's one of those things where people almost equate bad art to a bad artist, despite the fact that that's not the case. It does not equal that. And a lot of the problem with that is the problem with art being seen more now as not an expression of the person, but art becoming content to be consumed because people post their creations, people post what they make, and if it's not up to par, people viewing it absolutely have a conniption fit because how dare you put out this subpar content that's not as good and that is lesser for us to see. How dare you make me view this thing that I voluntarily looked at? And it's absurd because art is not just content. Art is an expression of the artist. And that's the way it is and has always been, even with the essentially contentification of art at this point. And it's important to address that because I think that's a huge contributor to the absolute horror that people view bad art with or creating bad art. For one thing, the issue with perfectionism, perfection itself isn't attainable. And trying to attain it is overwhelming. Especially because of the realization that comes with looking back at a piece that you once thought was wonderful. Even a piece that you thought was absolutely perfect, it came out just right. Give it a little bit and you'll look back on it after you improve and you're gonna find mistakes. And then that can contribute to imposter syndrome because, well, I thought that was a great piece. I thought that turned out great. So there's all those mistakes in it. So if there's all those mistakes in it, then what about my most recent piece that I thought was wonderful? Is it really bad too? Am I just not as good as I think I am? Are my skills way worse than they appear to me? And ultimately it ends in this awful, horrible cycle of imposter syndrome and trying to improve and get better and perfectionism. And it's just detrimental to the artists themselves. My point is, bad art is important. Bad art is how you learn. It's how you experiment. Learning to forgive your creative mistakes is healthy. It's one of those things where it even contributes to this issue of hobbyist versus professional. Because I have seen a major issue with people who are hobbyists being attacked for not having professional skills, or being told that they just shouldn't draw or shouldn't post if their art isn't going to be immaculate or as good as professionals, or if they're not trying to make money or content out of it, then they shouldn't be creating at all, or they should just keep it to themselves. Which, can we just let hobbyists be and exist, please? Like, not everything has to be turned into the most professional quality. Let hobbyists exist. It's treated so poorly and horribly, and I hate it. It's really frustrating. Especially because not everybody wants to be a professional with it. Some people just want to create. And that in itself is also important. Enjoying making your art is the important part. It is the most important part. Loving art is extremely important. Mistakes are just a mark of the potential you still have to improve. It's one of those things where no matter how much you do improve, there's still going to be room for improvement. And if something turns out bad, who cares? Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy making it? Exploring creativity can result in bad art, but it can also absolutely stretch your creative muscles and lead to new ideas. If you draw something badly, if you've got several ideas and you draw all of them badly, then you figure out which one you like the best because you're not putting any pressure on yourself. So looking at them like, oh, I like how this one's turning out best, so you can go with that. But ultimately, just stretching your creative muscles and giving yourself room to mess up and room to just be, for one thing, it can improve your relationship with your art. And this is coming from somebody who used to have a healthy relationship with their art, and I'm trying to repair that because it became unhealthy, because everything was perfection. If it wasn't good enough, then it was not good at all. If it wasn't perfect, if it wasn't up to my current high standards, then it just wasn't good at all. It was bad as a whole, even if I did certain things nice and certain things well, and even if I had improved. The piece itself was bad, so then I was bad. And that's a big problem. The fear of making bad art holds artists back, and it can lead to stagnation and a lack of progression in your art because you're afraid to step outside your comfort zone. You're afraid to do things that may not turn out the absolute best. It ends in being terrified of any mistake in your drawing, especially if you end up with a more critical audience. That's not good, and that's not healthy. It can lead to, like I said, stagnation and lack of progression, but it can even lead to regression. And I know there's been a big discussion about art regression in the community where it seems like your skills fall off. And I think this is something that really contributes to that. That fear of making bad art can create such a problem with that and make it so much harder to create and to improve because you want to stick with what you already know you can do good so that you don't risk putting out a bad piece. And it's really sad. Messy doodles, drawings in pen with tons of mistakes, accidentally coloring outside the lines, general mistakes at all. They're all beautiful in their own way. When I was younger, it was one of those things where I drew for the sake of drawing. I enjoyed creating. That was what I wanted to do all the time. I would draw during class. I got in trouble for drawing during class instead of doing my schoolwork. And it was just fun. I was drawing these messy, awful, horrible, upside-down, egg-headed characters with super sharp chins and noodle arms. And they looked horrible, but I didn't care because every time I got a facial expression the way I wanted it to be, every single time that I got a position that I thought was good, or mimicking something that I saw and I thought it turned out good, that was what mattered. I was having the time of my life, and I was a kid. I was a kid who was the weird kid in school who did everything weirdly and drew instead of taking notes and got in trouble for drawing in class. And I loved it. I loved every second of everything that I created, even when I looked back and I was like, oh, this one looks worse than what I made this time. That didn't matter. The fact that I had fun creating it was what mattered. I didn't care that something turned out worse. I just was happy that I made it. I made all kinds of comics that were horrible and ridiculous looking, and some panels would look horrible and some would look, to me at the time, really good. If I look back on them now, I know I would just want to keel over, because no. But to little me, it didn't matter, because little me was putting things out there that they liked. Little me was making things and filling notebooks upon notebooks, because I didn't have a proper sketchbook until I was in high school. I was taking printer paper with me to school. I was just drawing on notebook paper, really thin notebook paper, and coloring it with like scribbled gel pens, because the creating was the important part. I was making things. That was what was fun. It didn't matter if it was good. And I was so happy about art in general then. And I was still improving, even though I wasn't actively trying to. I was just drawing to draw. And I was getting better with every single line I put down on a page. I was getting better. I was improving. I remember when I discovered that people inked their sketches rather than just pencil and then crayon that smeared everywhere, or pencil and then colored pencil that smeared the graphite everywhere. I learned that people would actually do ink lines over their drawings and erase the sketch. So I tried it with a ballpoint pen first. And I guarantee you, every single line smeared like crazy no matter how long I let it dry, because it was a cheap ballpoint pen. But I didn't care. I did that, and then I'd put down color over it. And I had discovered something new. This was what I wanted to do going forward. I created new things with it because I found one new technique that I was botching over and over, but I didn't care because it was fun, because it was a blast. And I still remember when I used the black Pilot pens that had like the liquid ink and the little, needlepoint tip that I would use. Those were my inking pens. I didn't know art pens were a thing. So that was what I used. I used a Pilot pen, and then I found like these, they were called like Magna Tank or something. Big gel pens, had a ton of ink in them. And I would take them and mix match all the colored parts on them in a different way so that I was the only one who knew what color the actual ink in the pen was, because I knew what combination was each color of pen in the packs, because you couldn't just get the black one. You had to get a pack of like 5 of them. And they were all different colors. And I had a billion of the other colors because I only ever used the black. But I didn't care because I liked the way that pen looked. And I learned how to let the ink dry so it didn't smear everywhere because it was a gel pen. And how to be careful whenever I used my colored pencil, because again, if I wasn't careful and I went over things wrong, it smeared. But it didn't matter that I was making bad art or art that smeared, because it was fun. And I think a lot of people, even younger artists, aren't getting to go through that phase as much now. And it's sad, because everything has to be as good as possible. You shouldn't be creating at all unless you're creating top-tier art, which is very frustrating. Especially because, of course, with the materials and the resources that we have now, younger artists are getting better faster. But that in and of itself, along with the push for perfectionism, has also created a bit of an issue with ageism in the art community. Oh, you're this so many years old? Well, why aren't you at this level yet? Oh, you're so much worse than this person who is a ton younger than you, and it even gets internalized by older artists. It's so frustrating, and absolutely detrimental to the art community as a whole. We should be cheering each other on to make those mistakes, to learn those things, because those things, those mistakes, and all of that is exactly what leads to the good art, the pretty art. And discouraging each other isn't going to help anybody. It's just so much more positive and fun if we let ourselves be and let ourselves make mistakes. Let ourselves make our art. It's so important to make bad art, and you should make bad art because that's how you make the good art. So I really would encourage you guys, grab a sketchbook, grab a piece of printer paper, grab a piece of notebook paper if you really want to throw yourself back to that just mindset of I'm just creating to create, and just play. Turn that piece of paper into your personal art playground. Turn that one sketchbook that you've hardly used at all into your place to let yourself make mistakes. Let yourself have bad art. Collage it with sticky notes of corrections if you want, but let your bad art be. I just think that would help everyone. I think that would help with putting too much pressure on themselves, having a lot of fun with their art, and just being artists. So what do you guys think about it? Do you guys think it's important to make your bad art and let yourselves just experience it and experience creation and creativity? I think that that's a very important thing, but I want to hear what you guys think. But thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons, Inside Chaos, Salmon, and Creativa Artly. I really hope you guys enjoyed this topic. I want to do more like this. Let me know if you have any topic suggestions down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!